Now it's time to welcome our guest today, Ms. Ruchira Chaudhary. So welcome to Pune, Rotary Club of Pune Riverside. It's great to have you over here, and everybody's quite eager to listen to you. I'll just request Rohit to please give a brief of about Ruchira, her work.
Morning, friends. Ruchira is an alumni of University of Chicago, both School of Business. She studies the corporate and the academic world. She is a leading executive coach, adjunct faculty at several top-tier business schools, and runs a boutique consulting firm focused on organizational strategy solutions. Ruchira's diverse and electric functional background in mergers and acquisitions and in organizations design, culture, and strategy execution, coupled with her 2 decades of leadership experience in emerging markets in Asia, Middle East, North Africa, help her grasp challenging people issues. Ruchira frequently gets featured in and writes for leading business journal. She divides her time between Singapore and India. She has written a book, Coaching, the Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership, which is a forward by Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw and has been endorsed by Cheryl Sandberg, Nandan Nilikani, Kathleen Horan, S. Ramodarai from TCS, and many more. Friends are present, Ruchira Chaudhary.
Thank you, Rohitji. That was very generous of you. We didn't need such a, sort of big background about me. It's I'm firstly very grateful for you to invite me here. It's such a nice, intimate, group of people, which is very unlike a lot of the corporate ones I've done for so long now. The book released here in India, obviously it was ready last year, but because of COVID, they held it back, and then we went back and forth, and then they released it sometime in February. But then in the US and Europe market, it released in April. And then Singapore, being Singapore, which is where I've lived for the last 15 years, so stuck up, they wouldn't. So finally, they released it in the summer this year, July. So it's been like one staggered release after another, and I've done so many of these sessions. But what is I'm finding really lovely about being here today with you is that it's such a nice, cohesive group, and it's so informal. So let's keep that informal tone, and please ask me as many questions, and we can just have a lot of banter. I have a few slides, of course, but the whole idea is that we can make it as valuable for everybody, and just have lots of banter. So as Rohitji was saying, yes, I was supposedly dividing my time between Singapore and India, but that hasn't happened for now nearly 2 years. My last trip was in February 2020, and when I came, the world had changed, right? I just about made it. They started basically screening people 15 days, when the news hit COVID, and I just about had gotten out of that. They were literally trying to do contact tracing, not very well. It's India after all, but I escaped it, and since then I haven't gone back. So these days when the quarantine opens, but I'm here in Bombay. I'm not very far from most of you, I think. So thank you again for giving me the platform. I have a few, any expectations you have from the session, because I will definitely sort of do it in a more workshop style and give you enough opportunity to ask me questions. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
That's fine.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. If the host can give me some screen sharing rights, I will show you what I have, and with my off on, I'll just stop sharing. We can start chatting. Okay, whenever you can give me some screen sharing rights, I'll go there. But I'll, in the interim, tell you the story of. So this book really is a culmination of. It's not so much about the book today. It really is about the concept of leader as coach. It's a class I teach at the University of Chicago at the Booth School of Business. And I also have started now teaching this class, and I've done this in many, many different ways. The Isha Foundation, the Isha Leadership Academy, they were doing something recently. So they approached me. Sadhguru is a huge believer of human as humans should not be a resource. So they really wanted to talk about coaching. And I spent some time with the entire leadership, Isha Leadership Academy, doing a little session for them. So it's not, today it will really be more some basic concepts, and happy for you to sort of ask me any questions. Okay, I'll go back and forth, screen share, etc. Okay. So yeah, that's the name of the book, but it's not so much about the book, it's perhaps a concept. And I think before I go there, I want to talk to you a little bit about how I got into this whole coaching space, which itself is a story, frankly. This whole academia and all of that is fairly recent for me. I've been a consultant for many, many years. I do lots of mergers and acquisitions, org design, etc. And I was working for a large I was working in Singapore for a large financial services firm. It's a global firm. And I was really not having a great time, because I think my mandate was really to restructure it, but in their mind, restructuring meant just laying off people. And I would wake up every morning and think, why am I doing this to myself? It was just a very turbulent time in my career. I had this APAC head who I used to report to indirectly, but I remember once in a board meeting in Japan, he decided to start screaming at me in front of every board member. And I think you reach a point in your life and you question, why am I even doing this? And it's that time that the University of Chicago, which is where I studied, they said, okay, we need a coach. And I said, and basically it was funny because they needed a coach because Chicago Booth is such a numerically skewed school. Every Nobel laureate that has come out of there is a economics or a finance major. So I said, like, why are you asking me? And they said, basically, we think that coaching is very fuzzy and soft and nobody really understands it. You probably understand it, so you come and do it for us. So I said, listen, I'm not very flattered you're choosing me just because, but anyway, so that's the long story. And it was a good time for me. I myself didn't know what coaching really was. I was certified and all that, but I never really explored it. I have always been a consultant to CEOs. I used to do a lot of org design. And in this particular instance, I was running part of strategy for this financial services firm. So I said, okay, let's try it as an experiment of sorts. And, what's the worst thing that can happen? It'll fail. I'll be a terrible coach. And anyways, it'll give me the break, the breather that I needed to get out of this corporate world where I didn't want to wake up in the morning. So the reason I still have this photograph for you is when I decided to embark on this coaching journey and like this experiment I said to you, I realized coaching, yes, it might seem very fuzzy and amorphous, कि beginning nahi hai, end nahi hai, tangible nahi hai, measurable nahi hai, and that possibly to some extent is true. But there is something else that you do when you coach somebody. You really untangle the knots in someone's head. So this book cover is that space. So I really wanted Penguin to get it right, and the graphic designer just wouldn't do it. So this is a big spaghetti knot. It's like, it's totally knotted up, right? Uske baad you're trying to pull it out and you're untangling it. But a therapist can do that for you. They can help you untangle the knots. But what a coach does in essence, and what coaching does in essence, is untangle these knots, but that's not where they stop. They take it higher. They take this to the next level and make you a better version of yourself. And then we put all these, things like sun glowing, and it also it should make you shine brighter, right? It should shine the light on you, really. So that was the essence of coaching, and that's what I discovered. And the reason I think my experiment with coaching probably worked out better is that I was already a consultant and I had a specialization in strategy and all of that. So it was sort of easy for me to understand what somebody was studying in the classroom, what a leader was going through, what a CEO, a senior leader was going through in his or her work life. And then I could marry that to their personal trials and tribulations. Typically, the coaching world has been those that have morphed from HR or, other certifications. Mine was very different. For me, it all started because I was consulting and then I went into academia. So that's my story. And yes, when I embarked on it, I realized it was fuzzy maybe, but not so fuzzy. And you can make sense of it, and you can truly find ways in how you can make the person you're coaching go even higher. And that's what the book is about. They wanted me to write a book for aspiring managers, somebody just ki abhi team. They said somebody who was 30, 35 years old, has a small team. And as I started doing the research, I said, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be for anybody. It could be an entrepreneur. It could be somebody who's starting out in life. It could be for a student. It could be for a teacher. It could be for somebody like you who's, been around the block, who has, very large teams to look after. Because we have to think of coaching as a life skill, not something that only a leader should be thinking about. It's really the art of enabling somebody, making them become better than they are today. That's what coaching is. And the more we sort of embrace those constructs, I think we become better ourselves. So that's what the book is about. And I guess the inspiration for writing it, or in the whole essence of leader as a coach as a topic, not so much the book, is I read this somewhere and I found it very thought-provoking, right? James Couzes and Barry Posner are academics, but they're also very well-known. They've also written a very nice book on leadership called The Leadership Challenge. And it was very interesting. They say leadership is perhaps the most important asset in any organization. Yeah, we know that. But recently, a lot of research is saying that we have a complete shortage of leaders in the pipeline. And they say it's a global concern. And the World Economic Forum does a survey year on year. This is a national survey, not necessarily corporates. And they said that we truly have a leadership crisis because we don't have enough leaders today and for today and for tomorrow. And what does that really mean? It's not that we don't have capability or competence, and we have all that. We have enough and more people who are bright, who have the capability. But if you really drill deeper, it's how we build leaders. It's our approach to leadership. That is something we need to relook at. So let me unpack that thought. Let me clarify. See, what happens is most organizations, I say most, not all, and also in nations, we somehow have this tendency that the person who is doing the best work, someone who's making, the most numbers, your best salesperson, we promote that person to become a sales manager. It's just, in our mind, the best and the brightest performer becomes the best and the brightest leader. But if you look at history, that is not always the case. In the book, I've used the example of Sachin Tendulkar, right? Now, he's the best, not just batsman, but he's the best cricketer the world has ever seen. He, by any stretch of imagination. But if you look at his captaincy, it's perhaps his darkest days. In fact, it's largely forgotten. There are other examples like that. So we have to start realizing that it's not necessary that the one who shines the brightest, who's making the most runs in a team or making the most goals, has to be elevated to the leader. Leadership requires certain traits. It's empathy, it's the ability to take others along in the journey. Sometimes these people are so good at what they do, right? You're fabulous, you're so naturally gifted. You can't see the capability gap between where you are today and where somebody else is. How will you coach that person and bring that person to your level if your expectations are so high? So you need good captains, you need great leaders, but they don't have to be the best of the pack. They could be good performers. They don't have to be the best performers. And there's one more fundamental thing here, is that whether it's a Sachin or whether it's another leader in a corporate organization, they also have to be coached to become leaders, right? You have, let's say, done finance all your life. You're great. And as you keep rising in an organization, you learn more about finance. And one day they say, oh, this person is great. Isko CFO bana dete hain. So it's great. You know finance, but it doesn't mean you know how to lead people. In order to do that, you also have to teach people how to lead others. And that's a missing link for us. We just assume they'll automatically become the best leaders without really focusing on giving them the coaching, the nurturing, the training that they need. In fact, there's a very interesting study, if someone's interested. The University of Chicago has done it. It's by Professor Benjamin Bloom. He looked at what makes somebody a fabulous tennis player or a mathematician or a scientist, anything. And they said, they look back at the history, and they said all of these people were actually they were not super gifted to begin with. They were talented. But what is common amongst all of these super stellar, successful performers, the pianist, scientist, mathematician, is they all had great teachers or coaches who nurtured them. It's really about the nurturing and the coaching that makes us who we are today. And whether it's, if we want leaders that will coach leaders for tomorrow, we have to start coaching them today. And that's our missing link. So let's talk a little bit about what coaching is. And by the way, please, at any point you want to ask me any questions, it's not formal, so you can just stop me. Right? I love to meander and I can keep talking forever. So please feel free to ask me. So what is coaching and why must leaders transform into coaches, right? So agar aap Google karenge, you'll have like 800,000 definitions. At least that was the case when I was trying to write the book. Now I'm sure it's become even more than that. But so in essence, what is coaching? This is how I describe it in the context of the coaching as a leader. when you, the leader, you're coaching, you are maximizing performance. But to me, the bigger words here are potential. Performance is great, but this person also needs to have the potential. And the key words are non-directive and self-enabling. And when you do that, you develop this current performance and future potential. It has to be non-directive and self-enabling. Now, herein is a dichotomy. You can do survey after survey, and you can ask in organizations and otherwise. You ask managers, are you a good coach? Invariably, the answer will be yes, of course. But the reality is different. And the difference is we think we are coaching. And we make time for our people. Some of us, despite our busy schedules, will do that. But often when we are coaching, we are just telling people what to do. So this is what made me successful. This is how I became a CEO. And this is my playbook. So this is how you should do it. So in our mind, when we are coaching, in our mind, when we're actually helping people, we are not asking them questions so that they can find their own answers. We have such little time. We are chasing revenue targets. We have clients, disgruntled clients, happy clients. We have to fly. Once upon a time, before COVID, we were all flying like crazy. We started that again. Where is the time? And when we have that 30 minutes, we basically tell people ke aise karte hain, this is how we solved it last time. This is how you should do it. Now, when we do all of that, we're not coaching. We're not helping them think for themselves. And the pandemic has been a fantastic example of that, right? Nobody had all the answers. And the thing is, our world has become so complex, so complicated. It's not simple any longer. No leader can have all the answers. So unless we start leveraging this collective intelligence, unless we start asking people, what do you think about it? Unless we start bringing in diverse opinions, we truly cannot be, we ourselves will realize we cannot go through the motions of a command and control culture. So there's something in the chat. Okay. So I'm just sort of really hoping that, as leaders, we truly embrace these constructs of what it means to coach somebody and move away from this telling business to this asking. That's what that's what I guess the essence is. It's the whole asking and not telling. And this is like a divider slide for us. We usually use it for most webinars. As I was saying earlier, the world has become so complex. It's an internet connected sort of network of alliances, AI, etc. Basically, we can no longer have all the answers, right? It's just not possible for us. And there's internet, people have information at their fingertips. We can't tell them. Even when I'm teaching classes now, I remember I found it so hard to teach, as the world has evolved, especially the younger classes, younger people, when I try and teach, they're constantly on their phones. And I'm always worried I say something which is not true anymore. So I now have banned phones, by the way, and because I'm so embarrassed, so they'll find that I've said something, I'm quoting something wrongly, but I have to prepare so hard, especially when I'm teaching the 19 to 21-year-olds. They're so curious and they probably know so much more than me. So I guess it's, in one sense, it's an acceptance that you as a leader can't have all the answers. So surround yourself with people who do, and constantly seek those answers. And in the process, you become better and they become better. And yes, coaching is no longer a specialty, right? You cannot be a good leader or a manager without being a good coach. So that's my story. And I will show you some frameworks that I've developed and how you might want to use them. But before that, we can pause and you can ask me any questions if you have at this juncture. I can stop the screen share. And thank you everybody for all the lovely messages you're sending me. My number, everything I'll share, my email, everything is on the last slide. I'll do that for you. And so I have a few more slides to go, but I can stop the sharing, whatever you guys prefer.
No, you carry on.
You okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So back to screen sharing. Okay. Okay. So I'm hoping I've convinced you about coaching. But then as I was starting to write this, I think, by the way, Mahatma Gandhi ji said this. I didn't know this. My professor sent it to me. That a sign of a good leader is not how many followers you have, really. It's how many leaders you create. And in order to create these leaders, you have to build them. And yes, coaching is not the only thing. There are many other ways in which you do that. But start thinking about coaching not as that 30-minute window that you block in a conference room or now over a Zoom call. Coaching happens in many ways. It happens, when you give somebody real-time feedback, and you pick up the phone and send someone on WhatsApp, ke 5 minute baat kar lete hain. It could be as simple as that. And remember, once upon a time when we were in office regularly, you're taking a taxi home in Bombay, let's say, and you're stuck in traffic. The time that you spend just chit-chatting, or you're on a flight together, that real-time feedback, that conversation, that just checking in on people, that's also coaching. And in the book, what I've done is I've done a lot of interviews from a lot of leaders like you, and I've asked them how they coach. And I've got some very interesting examples. Some of them talk about how, when you have a new person in the team, they take them for senior client meetings to position them. When your boss's boss is in town, they said, I get them introduced so that we position that person. There's a very interesting story about a guy who runs a restaurant. And he said, I don't want to be intrusive, but yet what I want to see is how my people are doing and how I can help them. So when they're serving and, he walks around in his own restaurant and he pretends to fill glasses of water. And then he looks around, Ki kya ho raha hai? He absorbs all the action. And so later on, he can give some feedback and also ideas on how they can improve. So it's actually very interesting how people do it in very different ways, but it's a mindset. I think that's where I'm going with this. Coaching is a mindset. And the fact that we constantly ask people how you would do it is what makes a difference. So as I was trying to, write this book, one of the things that I wanted to do as a good academic was give people a model, a framework. And my trouble and my sort of challenge was that I honestly couldn't articulate very clearly myself, despite teaching the topic. What does coaching do? So when you ask all these powerful questions, how does that help the person? And how should you be structuring these discussions? And I honestly looked at lots of journals and HR stuff and ICF websites. It had lots of big words, right? Unleashes potential, return on ROI. But what does it really mean, right? We have to simplify that jargon. And so after lots of back and forth, looking at a lot of movies, Hindi movies, English movies, Kung Fu Panda, which my son was watching, I don't know, hundreds times, cricket, of course, lots of performing arts, I built this model. And in my mind, I call it the 4C+ model. And it has 4 clear cornerstones. The first is when you coach somebody, you're basically building their capability, right? You also then focus on giving them clarity, pretty much like the knots on the book cover, knots in someone's heads and you untangle it. The third piece is consciousness. Consciousness is nothing but self-awareness. I'll talk more about it. And the fourth piece, which is very important, I think, is confidence. And when these four jigsaw things come together, you have to create a culture. As in a culture where you constantly seek feedback, receive feedback. It has to be the norm. It's not something out of the blue. Okay, one fine day you decide to give someone feedback. It's very awkward, right? People, then they're not expecting it. You have to build that ecosystem where it's okay to say, okay, what do you think how I am doing? And similarly, you can give somebody feedback. That cultural piece has to come together. Otherwise, frankly, the coaching doesn't really work. So just to drill down on each of these facets, capability, it's really about being the best that you can be, right? All this potential that you have, somebody who's a good leader coach. And by the way, this is not leader coach. You can coach each other in the Rotary today. This whole business that it has to be upward and downward, we have to stop thinking about it like that, because I'm all for somebody who does peer-to-peer coaching or someone who can, coach a colleague in an organization. It's really about helping each other become better than they are today. And, you all have been doing such interesting work. The little bit I caught, I think you can constantly challenge your thinking in terms of how creative you can get or even more innovation. And I think all of that comes into the lateral thinking space, which is, it's not sequential, ek ke baad dusra, right? You can always think about going up and down and have those sort of squiggly lines and come back. That's how I think it helps you assemble whatever you think your career ladder is, but all of you are honestly probably at the top rung of the ladder anyway. You have to find your destination and what makes you happy. It's a lot of the work you're doing today is, I think, fulfillment more than anything else as leaders. Consciousness is self-awareness, which means nobody's perfect. Rohitji is not perfect. Ruchira is not perfect. Mohanji is not perfect, right? It is the realization that I'm not perfect. And there are clearly areas that I want to develop. And when you get a coach, that person holds up a mirror to you, right? You have to leave your ego at the door, but you can form these trusting relationships with people and constantly give each other feedback. It doesn't have to be with everybody. You can pick 1 or 2 people. And if you form that bond with them, you can give each other feedback. Confidence is the self-belief to go forward. And confidence is sometimes It's not as if we're not competent, we're not capable, but it's the confidence that holds us back. We see that a lot in women. Women, despite all their achievements, despite doing so well, will often not raise their hands. They will not volunteer. They almost think that, oh, maybe I'm not good enough for this. We constantly undermine our own achievements. And I think if you're a good leader, if you're a good colleague, you can give them that self-belief. Yes, we all have domestic challenges. You know, there are spouses, there are kids, there are things to be handled, there's elderly care, and often disproportionately we take the burden. But if you have with you a coach, that coach will help you think through the various options and give you that confidence to go forward. And of course, the biggest part of that puzzle is that clarity, that untangling of the knot, give you more direction, right? So that's a model. And as you start to coach, if you get this model, it'll give you some framework. I've also in the book given lots of ideas on how you can structure your conversation. So if anybody's interested, please, I can send that to you also, the frameworks. And the last thing is, I mean, before I stop sharing this, I'm always asked by people, can everybody coach? I've never coached. Do I have to be certified? The answer is very simple. You can. Anybody can coach. For some of us, it comes more naturally than others. We are generally more social. We have a higher EQ. Some of us don't. But if you can just sort of focus on a few key areas, I think the first part is you have to be willing to learn. In some ways, not just learn, but unlearn. Because over the years, we have very set ideas about how we want to, take people along in the journey. So many people say the biggest thing about learning to coach is actually unlearning. If you're prepared to unlearn or let go of some of these hardly, held beliefs that you have, you can definitely become that coach. And the first few things they say is know yourself first, which is self-awareness. Really connect with people. If your coaching is for your organizations, I would encourage you to truly get to make those bonds with your team members. If this coaching is, let's say, with the people here in this room, you already know each other. You just need to find parts where you really build those reservoirs of trust, where you suspend judgment. And I think the key here is a safe space. What I mean by a safe space is a place where you can open up without fear of what others will think of you, when someone will sit in judgment, what will people think about me? When you do that for your teams, make sure that you tell them that they're not going to be penalized for it. If someone has an idea which is different from yours, or if someone has a completely crazy idea, it's okay. Even if it's crazy, give them the chance to open up. Mostly people don't even utter that because they're so scared of the ramifications, that they look stupid or the boss will think it's idiotic. And that's the part we need to stop. We need to encourage people to think more, to open up more. And we have to develop this sort of mindset, what Satya Nadella called the growth mindset. Actually, not Satya Nadella, he embraces it. It's by a psychologist called Carol Dweck. So Satya talks a lot about that in his book, Hit Refresh. The growth mindset is really that everybody can change, right? Sometimes we have these sort of set beliefs ke isse to nahi hone wala. And I'm very sort of guilty of it myself. You have somebody in the team who's just been a lower performer and you let it go. But, I have seen people who have transformed these people and they've realized that maybe it's this team that's not working for them. Maybe it's this kind of work. Maybe it's not the person. Maybe there's something going on inside in the house. And if that is a kind of attitude we can embrace, I think we'll all just be in a much better space. I think that's really it for me. I just wanted to wrap up and say this is really coaching. It's help people discover strengths, maximize performance and potential, guide them. Don't solve their problems. Don't tell them what to do. Ask them how to do it. Cheryl Sandberg says nice things about the book. I'm going to go forward. You already know that. You can find it anywhere on the internet. There's lots of Google hits on it. She's been encouraging it. She's sent it to the Lean In chapter. And Kathleen Horan, who's from Microsoft, her quote was actually quite nice. I liked it a lot. She said, when you coach somebody, you guide the leaders of today on how to empower the leaders of tomorrow. If you're interested, of course, the book is available anywhere on Amazon, on any bookstore. Rohit ji will tell you where to get it. He's the best person. And yes, I'm very easily available on LinkedIn, on Twitter, email, everything. I have a website as well, so you can find me. I'm not hard to get to.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Okay, disclaimer, I'm a fellow coach. I'm also an executive coach.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
I'm very
Now,
scared of those types, I have to be honest.
not at all. Not at all. I'm a common everyday man, if I may say so. I've noticed with the pandemic, there has been an implosion or explosion of coaches. If you look on LinkedIn, everybody's an executive coach suddenly because 44-day program, ICF trained, everybody's done coaching. So how do you differentiate between the wheat and the chaff?
You're absolutely, it's such a fantastic question. I wish I knew a perfect answer, but I'll attempt to do it. In fact, in the last chapter, I did try and talk about it a little bit. And I wanted to also make the point that, you know, I keep saying it's a leader as coach, but remember, a leader can't do everything by himself or herself. There are certain junctures in the organization's life cycle or in a leader's transition journey where you'll have to tag team with a leadership coach or an executive coach, as Bharat is saying, right? And so firstly, I say, I mean, let's just, I'm going to sort of broaden your question a little bit. So I think it'll benefit everybody.
Yeah, sure.
First things first, I think we need to be clear when we want that leadership coach. If you're from an organizational science point of view or even from a personal point of view. These are precious dollars. And even though this is what I do for a living apart from teaching, I tell people, please think through, are you ready? Is this the time that you need a coach? If you're taking the decision on behalf of an organization, think about it. Is the organization going through a lot of change? Is there upheaval? Is there a business strategy change? Is it for our CEO or our board, which gets very little feedback? So that's one aspect of it. If it's a personal decision, then please think. Remember, a coach cannot become a crutch for you, right? If you can find someone in your own ecosystem, in your workplace, a colleague, maybe that's something you should look at also. But when you do decide to go in for a coach, and as you rightly said, there's been an explosion because, you know, our mental states right now are honestly, we're not in a good way. We're not okay. And increasingly people feel the need to have these conversations, to have sounding boards, someone who can just help them think through, give them more clarity with the struggle. My biggest challenge, Bharat, has been, I was almost embarrassed for the longest time to say I was a coach because the same thing, right? Everybody was a coach. And the way I started my journey was through business schools, so they would organize it for me. But the answer to your question is, I think in order to choose that coach, you need to have chemistry with the person. And first and foremost, when you select a coach, please spend at least 30-40 minutes, say, I'm not sure, but I really want to have a conversation with you, and then we can decide how we go forward. Yes, look at credentials if you need to, look at experience, look at recommendations from others, all of that's fine. But what works for you may be different from what has worked for somebody else. Firstly, be very clear what you want from that coaching. You must want coaching, otherwise it's not going to go forward. And to find that chemistry with that person. Only when you trust somebody can you open up in front of them. So you have to figure out whether that trust equation is on or off, and you'll figure that out quite quickly.
Yep.
Because if you don't respect somebody, if you don't like somebody, you know, I typically, if I start any session, don't do too much of it directly, but through corporates, I usually say, let's do a 30-minute conversation. Just my way. I say, let's chat. And, you know, if it works for you, great. And if you feel that our styles are different or you're looking for something else, that's okay too. I think that is just something I do personally. But
great. I'd like to leave a takeaway for you, which you actually covered in the last few sentences, which you said. Your 4C model is wonderful, by the way. I must compliment you. It's excellent. It's simple, rooted, common sense. I'd like to add one more C for you, which you have covered, but it's not there in the model. I call it the comfort, the C of comfort. Okay. My first session is always a buy-in. I attempt to get comfort for myself with the individual. More important, I attempt to see that the other person is comfortable with me.
Nice.
And I end the session, my coaching engagement, with another C of comfort with that person. Is that person comfortable in his new space as a leader? So,
very nice. Very nice. Thank you. I love these sessions. I learned so much more out of it. Thank you.
No, we all learn.
I'm going to steal it for my next session. Okay.
Please do that.
I see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruchira, I have a question. I am currently reading your book, and thanks for giving a lot of insights. And I act as external coach to some companies.
Oh,
where
wonderful.
CEOs know that I am external coach. I typically face this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Some seniors managers are very enthusiastic and they want to go through this coaching process.
Hmm.
But some managers have attitude, I know it all.
Huh.
That I know everything, there is nothing for me to learn.
Yeah.
And they are really causing a lot of harm to the organization because they are not learning and they are not passing these skills to others. So how do we handle people or managers who have this attitude, I know it all?
It's an interesting question, Mohanji, because there is a chapter which I don't know if you've come to it. It's one of those slightly harder, more profound ones, I think, as an academic model, chapter 8, where I've talked about it. But here's the thing, right? Coaching has to be a mindset, as I said earlier. It has to come from the belief that it's actually helping you, right? And if these managers are not buying into it, if they don't think it's going to change anything for them, it's really hard work for you, right? So there are a couple of things I can suggest. Will it truly change? Will it truly change how they are? May or may not be, right? But it's worth attempting it. Okay. Firstly, you have to think through who sponsored this coaching, right? The organization's paying you for this, right? So the mandate has come from the top. Hopefully it's a leader who believes in it, right? Now you need to perhaps coach that leader a little bit as well to say, we need to create a culture where people should be recognized for their coaching. Because, so there are two ways to think of it. Some people are intrinsically motivated, like maybe all of you attending the session today probably believe in coaching because that's why you're here, or at least you're curious about it. So a lot of us will do it because we know that this changes not just me, but it also makes somebody else better. I leave behind a legacy, all of that. But there is the other variety, the kind that you're describing, that doesn't see value in it. I've been there, done it. And by the way, I've come across that variety a lot in my life, especially CEOs. Right? I mean, your case, at least you're one of them. In my case, I was always, when I was younger, I would get a lot of attitude and say, now, what would you know, right? So here's the thing. You need to perhaps think about going to the top and having these conversations with those leaders and say, in order to create a coaching culture, you need to role model it. You need to be the one who needs to have more communication around what coaching does for you. Not you, the coach, but the leader in the organization has to talk about how can we make it a coaching culture. And for that, they need to, it's not going to change overnight, but they need to start thinking about how they celebrate people who are building others, right? Anybody else whose engagement scores are very high in the organization, you should talk more about them. You should talk more about, you should think about promotions. You should think about measuring it in the performance appraisal. Have a clearly defined KPI in terms of how many people, I'm just making it up, how many people did you coach or how many people got elevated in your team?
Okay.
Scores like that, right? So if it's not the softest stuff, you need to make it hard. And making it hard is about measurable. And we call it, we have a strategy concept, it's called ARC, an organization's ARC. So the A stands for the architecture. Architecture is the organization design, which is not as easy to change, but it's also how you hire people, right? So increasingly when you hire people, stop just looking at their experience and the pedigree in which business school, but think about attitude. Are these people going to coach other people? Are they people's people? And we have to start rethinking the way we hire people. The way we measure them, as I was saying earlier, is it a distinct KPI, right? Is our engagement scores tracked? Is satisfaction tracked? And when it's tracked, they will start to do it. Whether, sadly enough, whether they believe in it or not, they will start to do it, right? And the promotions should not be just for someone who's making all the numbers, who's been the best performer, but also someone who has great feedback from his team. So those kind of constructs you'll have to start putting in. And the last C, which is culture, is what I was mentioning. It's about role modeling it, right? It's about celebrating those who are doing well, success stories of those, perhaps a recognition thing. And you'll really enjoy the Microsoft case study because that's what Satya Nadella talks about, and how we spent 2 years listening to people, just listening to them. And then they built a model. It's called the coach, care, it's called a framework actually, not a model. Coach, care, model. Coach is all about coaching. Everybody in the organization has to coach, whether you're a solo performer, whether you're a senior leader, and you get evaluated against it. Coach, care is all about empathy, how you take people along, how empathetic you are. And coach, care, and model is what kind of a role model are you? So they track all of that, and everybody also embraces it. So I guess, Mohanji, I don't have a solution
Yeah,
for you
yeah, I know.
instantly, but it's sort of
Yeah.
a long-term thing. But
Okay.
you could do well to start coaching the leader in the organization to start at least sowing the seeds of a more coaching, learning organization culture.
Can I
Okay,
add
thank
something to this?
Please.
I've learned from experience is as a coach, don't become an undertaker. If you're hired by a client to coach someone,
Yes.
first thing is I find out, is this person being dubbed as useless? So as a last resort, they want to try coaching him. Don't be the undertaker.
Okay.
I don't take such an assignment. If he has been condemned already, then RIP, I would say.
Agreed.
Don't coach him by default. Thank you.
Thanks, Bharat. Thanks.
I have one question. Ruchira, I have one question.
Please do.
How will you differentiate between the structured training and the coaching? When I am talking about the structured training in organizations, whether it is a government or in the army, they have the structured training pattern, like at executive level training and middle level training, then higher level training, and those are conducted in renowned institutions like IIM and some global level. So how will you difference between the both?
Hanji. Mishra ji, in my mind, I think of training, any kind of training as an event. It's something that happens one time, right? Coaching is a process, and that's a definition we need to have. And the two can come together. You can have these bursts of training, and you absolutely should, right? You need to constantly make people better. You need to think, and coaching is not the only thing, right? You need to think of different ways in which we develop their own potential, right? Could be technical skills, could be other facets, conflict resolution, difficult conversations. So that should happen. But as a leader, I'm saying for you, it's a continuum. It doesn't stop. You are constantly, and even when someone comes back from a training, you can ask the questions. Okay, how did it go through for you? What did you learn? Why don't you do a session for us? That's your skill as a leader. You draw out the strength from them. You draw out the lessons that they have learned, right? You constantly encourage them, nurture them. So please don't stop the trainings, go all out, but tag team your coaching, because your coaching is, like, I don't know, like a bad analogy, but it's like, you have to iron your clothes every day. So you're the one who's helping press that shirt, but you can bring in an external coach or bring in that a trainer if you have to iron out a stubborn wrinkle, khali wo nikalna hai, uske liye you can bring in someone, you can do the training, but you still have to iron your clothes. You still have to have them starched every day. That's our job as leaders. We have to do what we do without thinking about it. It doesn't have to be complicated. Have 3 or 4 formal conversations, but also have those informal conversations. Just believe in people and give them the space to grow and keep asking questions.
Right, well taken and totally clarified. Thank you very much, Ruchira.
My pleasure entirely.
May I ask a question?
Can I ask a question, please?
Nilamji, you go ahead, please.
Thank you. It was very nice. I loved that 4C model. Thank you. Now, my question is, first, you have to have a lot of unusual common sense to think of uncommon sense. I put my son in an institute which is called Uncommon Sense. They are preparing, and it's a very wonderful concept. They are preparing kids for, future ready. Anyways, my question to you is, coach should be leader and leader should be coach. Now, when you are leader, you should be taught about coaching, and when you are coach, you should be taught about leadership. How you will take it, how you will talk about it. I mean, both are entangled. I felt after listening to you, yes, absolutely right, that you are leader, you have to be coach, and automatically it comes. But, taught coach.
It's an interesting question. I understand where you're coming from. So I don't know if it's a perfect answer. I'm going to attempt it. See, what used to happen earlier was somehow leadership was in some form management, right? Until sort of the 1990s, we really focused on making sure we got our numbers. Quarter on quarter, we focused on whatever, sales, product sales, marketing, etc. And this whole sort of rhetoric started changing in the 90s when I think they came up with the balanced scorecard. this whole thing was, okay, it's not just about the numbers. You have to start doing other things. Financials, you have to look at customer, you look at process. Of course, you need to look at people. So that mindset started changing. But until recently, and even now, coaching has never been something that we think is core to a leader, because organizations say coaching is really something you give to very senior leaders. And oh, they're always executive coaches. Then there's HR. HR can solve it. Somehow
Outsourced.
outsourced.
Coaching is
Somehow
outsourced.
it's also until recently, in fact, until a few years ago, and I'm sure Bharatji will add to that. Ironically, coaching was seen to be something which was a bit of a fix for people who were good, but they had behavioral challenges, or they had, they were toxic in some form. Great performers, but they were, but we needed to fix some parts of their personality. So let's get a coach. So people almost got intimidated. Ki, coaching ki zarurat hai. So we've gone through this whole mindset change. But what we're saying now, and I think I found it very nicely said by Suresh Narayanan, who heads Nestle here. He said, Ruchira, the day we start saying a leader also has to coach, we've lost the battle. A leader doesn't also have to coach. A leader has to coach. It has to be part and parcel of leadership, right? It's not a
inbuilt.
Yeah, it's a subset of leadership. When we say that a leader also has to coach, we say there's one more thing for the person to do, and then we add that burden onto someone who's already very busy. So that's the narrative he says we have to start thinking about it differently. That you can't be a manager or a leader without being a coach. It's something you have to do. You have to build the next line of leaders. It's not HR who will do it. It's not, an outsourced coach who will do it. They'll help you at different junctures when you need them, but it's your responsibility. And that's the mindset we need to come to. We're slowly getting there. We're not there yet. But I think sooner than later, I think especially the pandemic has shown us that we now need to take people along with us. We can't do it all alone.
Yeah, I mean, you have changed the definition. Gandhiji is leader because he has a lot of followers, but leaders should create leaders, and in only those organizations will be successful where they have created more leaders than others.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ruchira. My name is Sandeep. And first of all, thank you for being with us and that wonderful talk which you gave us. I have two very, very small and simple questions. First of all, I'm talking of one-on-one coaching. So is it possible to coach someone in a field, the person is already superior to you or more accomplished? Is it possible to do that?
Yes.
So that's my first question. Second question is, how do you see the difference between a guru and a teacher and a coach?
Okay, it's a nice, both of your questions, they're nice and they're not simple, by the way. Let me attempt them. So let's take the example of someone who's already, you said, very accomplished in that domain, right? Let's take our example, and I think Bharatji can add to that because he's probably a lot more versed. So when we go and coach somebody, let's say somebody like you, who's a very senior leader, and I really don't know much about your domain, I imagine. My first experience, I did a lot of work for Medtronic, which is the largest medical devices company. And prior to that, I'd always ever worked for telecoms or financial services. Right? I didn't understand the first thing about the cardiac unit versus the diabetes unit. And by the way, even as consultants, when we come in and do organization design or M&M, we don't really know the domain. But the role of a coach here is to ask you powerful questions, which is not necessarily going deep into the technical part of it, right? You need to be somebody who is well aware of your environment. You obviously have to be up the curve. You obviously need to know a little bit about what's going on in your domain. But do I have to be an expert in what you do? No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm helping you, sort of untangle the knots in your head. And when I do that, I ask you pertinent questions about you. So my question would be more like, Sandeep, how do you think you will approach it? So what's going on with you right now, Sandeep? So, or if you say I'm stuck because I can't make up my mind, I have these 3 people I want to hire. My role would be more about helping you come up. You will find that answer, not me. Helping facilitate that conversation with you through some of these constructs. Whether I know the first thing about, medical devices or it doesn't matter. As a good coach, it is our job to be abreast of what's happening in the world, but also we will focus on you. not so much your domain, right? Because coaching is all about you, the person, and making you better at what you do. When you have the leader as a coach can actually go the extra mile and help you a little bit more in that domain. And again, sometimes your bosses are not the ones who are better than you in the technical sphere, right? As we go up the value chain, you will find that as a leader, it's more about the business vision, it's more about strategy than the technical expertise, which is why the best leaders surround themselves with people who are better than them at the technical aspects of it. But coaching, you can coach each other. You can coach somebody who's senior, you can coach somebody obviously who works for you, because coaching is really about enabling the other person to think out of his or her comfort zone. See, Bharatji, I used your C.
Yeah.
Sorry, second question. I forgot your second question now. I spoke so much about the first one. What was your second question? Sorry.
Thank you for that answer. My second question was about a guru, a teacher, and a coach.
That's right. So, not perfect definition, but a guru and a teacher typically is more prescriptive. They give you a lot of wisdom and they're telling you what to do. Mentors also do that, right? You look at them, you look at them, there's a lot of respect, but it's more instructive, right? Where they say, this is how you do it. A coach is different because they don't tell you, they ask you how to do it. And that is the key difference. Though as leaders, I do encourage you to wear different hats at all times. There are times when you'll have to instruct. There are times where you'll have to be the teacher. There are times where you'll have to be directive, but you have to make space for that coaching time, which is asking questions in a safe space to help people become better.
Thank you so much.
Rakesh?
Oh, great, Ruchira ji. I feel there is very fine line between leadership and coaching. And people are hesitant to cross over from leadership to coaching or from coaching to leadership, because a lot of senior people, they have to perform dual role as far as today's world is concerned. And but means quite often it is taken as that coaching is more of a training, but coaching is quite different. In general perception, it is training which is taken as coaching. So your explanations, they are really very fine and to the point, I will say, and you are hitting the head on the head of the nail. And I'll say that it is a fantastic book that you have written. It is a true guidance to real coaching people who are into this or who want to take this coaching as a profession. So it's great. So not taking much time, I'll request Colonel Mishra to please propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rakesh ji. Ruchira, this has been great session today with the Riversiders. In fact, the title of your book, Coaching the Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership. The topic itself is very interesting. The book title itself is very interesting. This uncommon is not common and makes a lot of difference. We have seen through your talk, a lot of insight we have gained. And you have already mentioned that the coaching is a lifestyle and it's an ongoing process. And we have very well been able to understand that difference between the training and the coaching. And coaching is for both. It's for the leader as well as for the teammates. So leader has to take the coaching for himself, and he can be a coach for his teammates in the later stage. Undoubtedly, you have already mentioned one point. Undoubtedly, leadership is the most important asset in every organization. And undoubtedly, the coaching and the training at every level is very important. And without this, organization cannot grow. One more point which you have, I think, brought out, and that's very relevant. The shortage of leaders in global concern is a very key factor. It's known factor now. It's when you are talking about the leadership, when actual leaders, there are leaders, so many leaders, but actually, are they performing? Are they delivering? Are they motivating? Are they inspiring? Are they achieving the objective of the organization? That's the million-dollar question. So keeping that in view, and it's as good as as good as the shortage of skilled labor in skilled workforce in that organization. So it's a skilled workforce and skilled leadership will both join hand together, and coaching goes nothing like that. There will be miracles. So with these words, once again, extending, I mean, it's very fantastic, very interesting. And currently I'm in California, and it's evening. I am interested in this book. I don't know how to get and read this book. So Rohit, can you help me in this regard, or Ruchira, you can tell me, can I how can I get this book?
If you're coming to India sometime soon, Rohitji, otherwise Amazon. Amazon, and from Brazil to Puerto Rico, Japan, just good old Amazon.
Okay. But I'm really interested after listening you to go through this book, and I would like to buy one, maybe from Rohit, maybe from Amazon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ruchira. Thank you, Rakesh.
Thank you, Colonel sir. So it's now time to have little lighter moments. So I'll request Sandeep for today's joke.
Rakesh, good morning, and good morning everybody else. So since Vikram is missing, may I substitute for him as well?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so this is a quote by Denzel Washington. He says, "You will only be criticized by people those who do lesser than you."
Wow, good, great.
When I say criticism, I'm talking of negative criticism over here. Anyways, coming to the lighter moments. So with your permission, I'm going to share it in Hindi. तो एक गॉडफादर को अकाउंटेंट चाहिए, तो लोगों ने बोला भाई अकाउंटेंट बड़ा रिस्की है, ये जाकर कभी भी किसी को कुछ बता सकता है। तो किसी ने आइडिया दिया एक ऐसा आदमी लो जो कि बात ना कर सके, सुन ना सके। बोले ये अच्छा आइडिया है, कभी कुछ नहीं बता पाएगा। साल भर के बाद पता लगा $10 मिलियन गायब है। अब पता कैसे करें, ये तो बोल भी नहीं सकता, बता भी नहीं सकता। तो एक आदमी को बुलाया गया, साइन लैंग्वेज वाला। उसको बोला भाई पूछो इससे पैसे कहाँ हैं। तो उससे पूछा भाई पैसे किधर हैं, तो बोलता मुझे नहीं मालूम। तो गॉडफादर ने बोला कि एक काम करो, इसको डराओ, इसको बोलो कि अगर बताओगे नहीं तो गोली मार देंगे साहब। तो उसने पूछा, तो बोला कि अरे ऐसा है कि वो मेरा कजन है, उसका जो बेटा है उसके तकिए के नीचे मैंने छुपा के रखे हैं। तो पूछा गॉडफादर ने, भाई क्या बताया इसने? उसने बोला, इसने बोला है कि अगर आप में इतनी हिम्मत नहीं है कि आप उसे गोली मार सको। थैंक यू।
So thank you, Sandeep ji. Thanks a lot. So now it's the time. So with your permission, can we call the meeting? Done that. So meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks for attending. And Ruchira ji, once again, thanks to you.
Thank you. My pleasure. It was a privilege to meet all of you. Bye-bye. Please stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit ji. Bye.